Transmission. It is December 4th, 2024, 1200 hours. Is anybody out there? This is the Blue Iron Lion broadcasting from somewhere. I didn't like how my last transmission came out, the one titled You Look It. It irked me a little. I felt I was talking too slow. What happened was it was 12 in the morning and I was tired, so I was trying to keep it together. Maybe it's just me, but I'm going to try not to sound so tired in this one. If so, then that's just my voice. You know, for a lot of us back in the day, especially back in my day, there was this pattern we followed. And you can tell me if this still rings true for you. You go to school, you're told you can be anything you want to be. Then at some point during, you're told you need a college degree to get ahead. So you work hard, get that degree, and you think life's going to play out like something out of the Cosby Show. But then reality hits, right? You realize it's not that simple. You got the degree, but the job market itself is hyper competitive. And why is that? Saturation. So before my time, it was said that a high school diploma could land you a solid job. And so a college degree then was like having a master's. It really set you apart. But eventually, everyone caught on and got saturated. It was around the early 2000s I started noticing people's complaints about earning degrees yet not being able to find work. What it was this. Right? As the workforce evolved, so did the standards. And so a general college degree was no longer the ticket. It was now about what you're getting the degree in. Now, I'll admit, I never got a degree. Just some credits equivalent to an associate. I just couldn't figure out what I really wanted to do, Like at one point, I thought about becoming a computer engineer. At another point, an electrician. Just picking something that sounded important or looked like it would pay. But honestly, nothing held my interest. I felt bored with everything. So I ended up wasting time and ended up taking the dreaded break from college, which almost no man ever returns. But also during that time, I got into the best kept secret, temp work. So when you were looking for work and it felt impossible to get a decent job without the specific credentials in one of the more important fields, the temp agency was like a foot in the door. Depending on how one looked at it, like if you had a family to look out for, then the uncertainty of temporary assignments could be nerve-wracking. But if you were a young, presentable person with basic high school knowledge in need of a job, it could be perfect. So they would hire you out on these temporary jobs, giving you the understanding that it was just for 2 weeks to a month to help out around the office. And often that would be the case. But inevitably, you chanced yourself doing indefinite months at a promising new startup or a prestigious brokerage firm, as wasn't the case with me. I ended up working at a brokerage firm, even though I wasn't licensed. It was in the back office, several steps more dignified than the mailroom, to which I worked a mailroom before, so I don't want those of you out there that may be currently in one to think that I'm crapping on you. But yeah, I worked in a back office with a team, a few of whom did actually have degrees and were themselves starting out. I would be processing accounts for individuals who had net worths of hundreds of thousands to millions on onwards. I'd even see a few celebrity and athlete names from time to time. I wouldn't care to remember who, though. It was in the 90s. Okay, so it was sort of a glorified data entry for any technical jerks out there. But then, the leverage one does have in such a scenario is being considered on the inside of such places. And so they liked me and eventually hired me full time. They even offered to sponsor me for licensing, which would have costed me $700 worth of materials, preparation, and a registration spot for the exam. This would have opened up a lot of doors for me, and without a degree. I would have had the name of the company under my belt, the trust of already being inside, the license that would have put me out on the floor of more importance, learning even more, and I'd be only 20 years old. That is where the temp agencies have often defaulted many a aimless young folk back then. I never did end up getting that license, though. I just didn't have a passion enough for it to read through all that material. Sure, I'd get temporarily motivated by the prospect of what it could bring, but in my young mind, after a long and tedious chapter, I reasoned, I'll get to it when I get to it, and then fate would have other plans for me, something more meaningful later on. But getting back to the temp agency card, 9/11 happened. After that, things got very scarce, and even a year later, let's just say you'd be lucky if an agency found you work at a cardboard box making factory. That era, the temp agency era, was over. And so, that takes us back to what I mentioned in the beginning about when I started to notice the shift in attitude towards college. From the early 2000s onwards, you'd hear things like college just isn't for me, or college is a scam. I feel, though, that the root of this more had to do with young people being disillusioned with the system itself, especially after seeing the growing trend of college graduates struggling to find the jobs they wanted. It created this cycle of frustration, or they started to see the game and didn't want to play anymore. Still, though, the catch-22 was that without college or a plan, they felt stuck. If you think finding work with a college degree is hard, good luck going out there post-2000 with just a high school diploma. It'll be like that lyric from Ice Cube. Always knew I was meant to clock G's, but welcome to McDonald's, may I take your order, please? Right? So here's the bottom line. You need to find a skill and become very passionate about it. That's the key. That's the real challenge when it comes to finding success. That may lead you to college, a trade, or entrepreneurship and starting your own business down the line. It has to pay, though, or it is just a hobby until you can make that hobby pay out. That's the thing. If your passion is basket weaving, that's going to be a challenge out there, at least until your basket weaving business takes flight. And that's the strong case for going to college or doing a trade first. And speaking of trade, who wouldn't want to get paid to learn the job, learn on the job, like plumbing, electrician, or HVAC, then get transitioned into an actual job? Even the trades that require payment are still cheaper and allow entry into that field way faster than the more expensive alternative. In my opinion, college is good for specific things like doctor in the medical field, attorney, engineer, a coding program, scholarships in the field of interest, etc. Anyone out there can feel free to fill in the blanks of what I left out. But yeah, if you're going the college route, find a field that you're passionate about that pays. Now, I say passionate because anything you obsess over, you've no choice to get good at, There's people who try, and then there's people who can't stop, right? Or there's killers, and then there's serial killers. What can I say? In all seriousness, though, balance. The hurdle is finding a balance between what you're passionate about and what pays the bills. Some people are lucky. They have a natural talent or passion for things that is set right before them from a young age. Plenty of time to get good. For them, it doesn't feel like work. It's who they are. For others, though, they've got to find it. Think about it, right? Let's say for whatever reason, you just love numbers. You love to count. You have a fixation for keeping track of how many beans fits into a jar since you were 5. Right? And when you continue your education in college, then, for anything to do with accounting, you'd excel while sleeping. Not only that, every aspect of your work in combination with your drive would lead you into the likelihood of managing the books for a high-level payout. Now compare that to someone who just took up accounting because their parents wanted them to, or because they saw that it could pay. If they didn't bore themselves out of passing the class, then they might be miserable at their job, no doubt affecting other aspects of their life, perhaps never going much further beyond the standard pay. That's the trick. If you weren't born with it, then research a skill that you can get to that level with. For example, for me, it was trading. I got into it later on, and then I got into it. I even reasoned that working in that brokerage firm back then must have been a sign. And I'm good at it. I've returned percentages that no one would believe. It went from hobby to a paid skill, and then back to a hobby again. Right? Greed took over, and the discipline went out the window. A true setback. Also, the pandemic didn't help either. But I'll come even more correct next round. It was a paid skill once, it will be so again. Fortified. See? That's the tenacity one must have in anything you're going to do to earn in this realm. Unless, of course, you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth. Then you're already good out there. But for the rest of us, we've got to find that skill first. whatever that may be, before we can get to that spoon. For anyone out there that cares to listen. End transmission.